Okay, today we'll be talking about keys to interview success. And the topics that we are going to touch on today include interviewers' thoughts, interview formats, the key to interview prepare, nonverbal communication, types of interview questions, STAR method, questions for the employer, and follow-up after the interview. So it's my hope after this presentation that the audience feels more comfortable just knowing what goes on during an interview and just more confident as they prepare when they're going into interviews. So I first like to think about what an employer is going to think during an interview. I think this really helps individuals sort of prepare beforehand in knowing what types of items or what types of things employers are going to be looking at. So one of the questions that's going to come to employer is, does the candidate have the skills to do the job? While they're going to see the skills on your resume, you really want to make sure that during an interview, you're able to really articulate those specific experiences or those specific skills that you can bring to the position. Another item that they're going to look out for is how will the candidate contribute to the organization team. So while it's important for the employer to have those work responsibilities, values that you're looking for, they are looking on the other hand, how are you going to contribute to our organization? What can you bring to make us more successful? Will the candidate be compatible with the existing team or company culture? A lot of employers, besides your skills, are also looking for how you're going to interact with their existing team members. Is the candidate the best fit for the position? You may be great for a job, but the employer really wants to assess, based on your skills, what can you contribute, and will you be compatible with the teamwork culture? Will you be the best candidate? So what are some formats you can come across? Typically, most individuals are familiar with that one-on-one format where an employer is asking you questions face-to-face. But some other interview formats you can run into would include technology. Many employers are moving to phone interview screenings. For some individuals, this may be uncomfortable because you can't really look at the nonverbals of the employer. But what's really great about phone interviews is that you can actually have notes in front of you. So if you want to refer down to the notes while you're talking to the employer, you're able to do that. In addition, you may run across the Skype or video interview. For this type of interview, that could be you talking directly through an employer through Skype, or you even recording your answers and sending it to an employer. So for these types of interviews, you want to first make sure that you know the technology that's being used. Don't use it the first day of your interview. And also both for the phone and Skype video interviews, you really want to make sure that you're in an environment that's quiet, that you won't get interrupted, so you can really concentrate on your interview. Another type of interview format you can run into would be outside the office. So that would include lunch or dinner interviews. Again, the employer is trying to assess how will you interact with them or the team members, and how you also interact with people outside of the organization. In addition, you could also have multiple person interviews. This would include group interviews, where there is you and other candidates interviewing for the same position. The employer is trying to assess how do you interact with other individuals. Or it could be the panel interview. That could be where more than one person interviewing you at the same time. Actually, for my interview for the career counseling position, I was interviewed by over 12 individuals. Again, they want to see how would you interact with their team. So what is the best way to get ready for an interview? The key to interviewing is preparing. First thing, know about yourself. You want to know your resume inside and out. Whatever is on your resume is fair game for the employer to ask you. So if there's anything on there that maybe you don't have a great example for, you can't really articulate, I may suggest removing it, just because anything they ask you, you want to be able to provide that example right away. Also, what sets you apart from the other candidates in terms of your student organizations, volunteer activities, your work experience. You really want to be able to articulate this, because since you are competing against other candidates, you have to know what about you is going to be different than the other candidates applying. Something else that is really crucial during the interview process is researching the company. Many individuals don't take this time to do this, but is probably one of the most important things to do before you go into the interview. So first things first, what is the job position? That may sound very basic, but what would exactly you be doing in the job position? Do you know what exactly your responsibilities would be? When it comes to the company themselves, what do they do? Do you know about the company? Do you know about their values or missions? Even taking that a step above, what is going on currently with the company? Many employers may be looking at your social media profile, and you can do the same. You can look at an employer's social media, even news articles about what's going on with the company, not only to do your research, but it's a great conversation starter for an interview. And while you research the company, really assess, is the job a right fit for you? Another way you can prepare as well is to schedule a mock interview. So at University Career Service, we actually invite students to come out, and we do face-to-face interviews with students. So through the mock interview, we'll ask you questions based on your industry, and then we'll not only give you feedback on your responses, but we'll also give you feedback on your nonverbals. And that leads me to my next topic, nonverbal communication. Again, this is an area that many individuals don't think about during an interview, but it's one of the most prevalent things during an interview because it's the first thing that an employer sees. So just some things to be mindful of. Beware of a hard or weak handshake, a scared or nervous facial expression, slouching on a chair, fidgeting or playing with items, exaggerated hand gestures, and not maintaining eye contact. These are things that we all do during interviews, but if you know one or two of these items is something you constantly do, come to a mock interview. We'll work with the counselor. You'll be able to tell them, hey, maybe I fidget a lot when I am doing an interview, and they're able to point that out so we can recorrect it while you go through the interview process. And remember, it's okay to smile and be excited about the interview. For many people, it can be very nerve-wracking, but you've gotten that far in the application process. So be okay to be excited about it, and it's okay to smile. So what type of interview questions could you run into? The first one are the traditional or basic questions. Those will include questions about your education, experience, activities, and goals. The second one's behavioral. So the interviewer is going to ask you examples of past behaviors to predict future behaviors. The reason why they're going to do this is because the way you handled a situation or reacted in the past is how you'll react or handle a situation in the future. And another type of interview question that you could run into is technical. So the interviewer will ask you knowledge and experience about certain technology. So what are some ways you can address answering these questions? One way that we recommend is the STAR method. STAR stands for the acronym Situation, Task, Action, and Result. And basically, it's a way for you to answer these questions, particularly the behavioral questions. So let's say you get a question during an interview. Tell me about a time you worked with a group on a project. The first thing I want to know is the situation. Describe who, what, when, who was in the project, how many people were in your group, what was the project about. Going on to that task portion, what was the goal of the project? Now jumping into the action, describe what kind of steps your group completed to accomplish that project. Did you take on the initiative as a leader to sort of assign different tasks? Maybe you were the organizer. Maybe you were the person who's doing the research. You really want to be specific about these items. And finally, probably the most important part of STAR is the result. So summarizing the outcome in business terms. So what happened with the project? Did you get an A? Were you able to present the project maybe in other classes or in a conference? But with the result, you really want to make sure that you include this in your answers, because many times when you don't include the result, it's like getting to the end of a movie and you don't know what happens. So really utilize the STAR method when you're thinking about your responses, because it will give an employer a better picture of what you did and how you'll do it in the future. So at the end of the interview, you will most likely be asked, do you have any questions for us? And you do want to have questions. This is really your time to ask the employer any questions you maybe would not be able to look up on their website or something that's not really easily accessible. So just some ideas of what questions you could ask. Those could include, why did this type of work interest you and how did you get started? How would your performance be measured? How would you describe the company's management style? This is one of my favorite questions. What has been the best moment in the company so far for you? And it is acceptable to ask, what is the next step in the hiring process? And lastly, after an interview, I always recommend to follow up with an employer and just send them a thank you note. It could be a thank you note or email, but really thank them for the time for interviewing them. Even though you may not see it, interviewing is a very long process. Employers have to read through your resumes, invite you out to the interviews, take time from their schedules to do the interview. So be very grateful that you have made it that far in the application process, because not everyone does. So a simple gesture, just thanking them for their time. In the thank you note, it doesn't have to be anything very long or very detailed. It can just be a short, sweet, to the point. Thank them for the meeting. You can also include items that you talked about that were really meaningful or really stood out to you. And you can even take it a step above and reiterate what skills you can bring to that position. An example here is, Dear Sam, I want to thank you and Jessica for taking the time to interview me this afternoon. It was great to meet each of you and learn more about the day-to-day goals of the sales representative position. I enjoyed learning about the company's new sales strategies and plans to expand. From our conversation, I believe that I would be a great candidate for the position based on my rapport building and product knowledge skills. Thank you once again for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you about the final decision. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions, and then you can have your closing remark. And again, this really does leave a lasting impression with the employers, whether you do or don't get the job. And if you have any additional questions about interviewing, you're more than welcome to call me at the email listed on the screen. But thank you for tuning in to Keys to Interview Success.